The Ice type is undeniably one of the worst types in Pokemon. But why? Well, Ice is weak to 4 different types, and defensively, it also doesn't resist anything except for itself. This all means that Ice types just generally struggle to survive, historically making it a pretty awful type. Despite that, Game Freak has been actively trying to fix the Ice type with the addition of new Ice moves and changes to weather mechanics in recent generations. But even with these changes, is the Ice type still terrible? Well, to test this, I decided to try and beat Pokémon Scarlet using only the frail, pitiful Ice types. So, do these buffs make the Ice type more viable, or should it still be condemned as one of the worst types in Pokemon? Well, let's find out. We load into the game, and our first problem is actually finding an Ice-type Pokemon. None of the Paldean starters or early route Pokemon can be made into a suitable Ice-type. So, to get our first Pokemon, we have to wait until after the game's long introduction through cutscene hell. But once that's taken care of, the map really opens up, and we're able to hunt down our first Frosty Pokemon. Although, this one's a little strange, because it actually comes from an in-game trade. See, with this NPC in Cortondo, we can trade them a Flabébé, and in return, we receive Snom. This little guy is the perfect Ice-type starter, because Snom has one of the worst stat distributions of any Pokemon ever. And as an Ice bug type, Snom is basically the poster child of weak type combinations. So it perfectly represents the struggles of the Ice type. On that note, I want to know which of the new Paldean Ice type Pokemon do you think is the coolest? Personally, I've grown to love the Iron Delibot, mostly because it's an actually viable Delibird, but let me know what you think in the comments below. Anyway, with Snozelot the Snom now secured, I decided to try and take on the first gym since we're already here in Cortondo. But before we can take it on, first we're stopped by Nemona. Who are you supposed to be? Me? I'm cool guy. Get it? Since I like Ice types? It's ice to meet you, Nemona. Oh my god, I hate him already. After leaving that amazing first impression with Nemona, I decided to take on the first gym leader, Katie. She's only got 3 weak bug types on her team, but since I only have Snom, I wasn't feeling too confident about our chances of winning this. Although, despite my low expectations, I was still shocked about how poorly this went, because Snom is so weak that it can barely even make it past Katie's very first Pokemon. Our damage output with Powder Snow is pretty pathetic, meaning that once Katie's Tarantula hits the field, it doesn't take very long at all for Sir Snozelot to be crushed like the little icy bug that it is. By no means did I expect to win that fight with just Snom, however, I also wasn't expecting us to get beaten down that badly. So clearly, Snom on its own would not be enough, as we'd need to seek out some ice-cold reinforcements. However, that's easier said than done. Ice types are generally pretty hard to come by, and in the case of Pokemon Scarlet, a lot of them live in the Glaciado Mountain, which is just way too high level for us at the moment. This means that our option for early game ice types are incredibly limited. With that said, there is one Pokemon that we can catch right away, and it's found nearby in the outskirts of Cortondo. That Pokemon is Eevee. Despite Eevee almost killing my weak little Snom, thankfully we are able to catch it. Although, obviously, Eevee isn't an ice type yet. To evolve it into Glaceon, first we'll need to give it an Ice Stone. However, this introduces another problem, because Ice Stones can't be bought in the shop, nor is there a way to quickly find one. Instead, the only way to get an Ice Stone is by picking up random sparkling loot on the ground in Glaciado Mountain. So, since we have no other option, I have to trek all the way across the map until we eventually reach the mountain. We then have to run around, picking up every piece of loot I come across. But this just takes forever. Since the Ice Stone is a rare drop, I ended up spending over an hour helplessly running up and down this mountain. These are the everyday struggles of an Ice-type trainer. Eventually though, we do find ourselves an Ice Stone, as well as some other helpful items along the way. With that, we're clear to return to Cortondo, and thanks to that Ice Stone, we shove our Eevee into the freezer for 2 to 5 business days before pulling out a Glaceon. This guy is a massive improvement over Snom, with really good stats, especially for this early on in the game. However, since we're also playing with a bunch of extra rules on top that make this challenge even harder, we can't overlevel our Pokemon or use any items from the bag in battle. So, despite being outnumbered, with Glaceon and Snom spearheading our roster, I charged back into the Cortondo gym before stepping up to Katie for a rematch. And this time, things go very differently. Thanks to Glaceon's impressive special attack, it only takes a single icy wind for us to pick up the first KO on Nimble. The Tarantula that follows is able to survive a hit, but can't deal a whole lot of damage back to us in response, allowing Snowcone the Glaceon to claim another kill on the following turn with Swift. This all leaves Katie with only her Teddiursa, who can be a menace once it gets rolling with Fury Cutter. However, our Glaceon is just too cold for Katie to handle, as, with a few icy wins, we outlast Teddiursa before one last Swift gives us the final KO. With that, Glaceon had swept the first gym and secured our very first badge, leaving Katie and her bug collection frozen solid. Although, I am starting to realize that being an Ice-type trainer is expensive. I mean, running a freezer 24/7 to stop these guys from melting is not cheap. Thankfully, there is a way to better manage our finances with the help of this video's sponsor, Rocket Money. In the current era, it's pretty much impossible to avoid paid subscriptions with automatic renewals. Personally, I've had multiple times where I forgot to cancel a subscription, only to realize 6 months later, after having already paid hundreds of dollars for a service I'm not using. But that's where Rocket Money comes in. It's a personal finance app that helps you manage your money. Rocket Money can analyze your spending and identify all of your subscriptions into one simple list. From there, you can select any unwanted subscriptions, and with just a few taps, Rocket Money will cancel them for you, without you needing to make a phone call or go hunting for some hidden cancel button on a company's website. On top of that, Rocket Money can also lower your bills by negotiating with service providers on your behalf, as well as help you set budgets. Rocket Money has helped its customers save up to $740 a year when using the premium features, and they've cancelled a total of over $880 million worth of subscriptions for their users. So, if you want to save more, join the over 10 million people already using Rocket Money. Click the link in the description or scan the QR code on screen to get started for free today. Despite the comfortable win there, it's our next fight that has me a little worried, as this time, we're taking on the first Titan, the Crab King Claw. Not only is Claw a Titan Pokemon, it's also a Rock type, one of the Ice type's many weaknesses. On top of that, Snom is 4 times weak to Rock, making it even more useless than usual. So, once again, we're basically relying on Glaceon. On the plus side though, Claw has an abysmal special defense stat which our Glaceon can take advantage of. As a result, Icy Wind does pretty solid damage, and after Glaceon survives a second hit, we land our third Icy Wind to end the first phase without any casualties. So that was clean, but the second phase is a bit of a different story. While we do now get to team up with Arven, Claw returns with some scary stat buffs. Just like the first phase, my plan is to spam Icy Wind, although this time, Claw hits Glaceon with a Rock Smash that also lowers our defense stat in the process. On top of that, once we lower Claw below half health, it also gets an attack boost thanks to its ability. This all means that on the following turn, when Claw hits Glaceon with a Rock Tomb, our Icy Fox is completely wiped off the map in a single shot. With our ace taken out, now we're left with only our little Snom, a Pokemon that will probably die if it even gets within 3 feet of a rock. All I can really do here is fire off Struggle Bugs and pray. On the first turn, Claw decides to attack Arven, which lets us land some small chip damage. On the following turn, Arven then decides to actually contribute to this group assignment as Water Gun brings Claw to the brink of death. And thankfully, Claw has 0 IQ as it attacks Snom with Rock Smash. Since it's a fighting type move, for some reason, Snom can survive thanks to its secondary bug type. If Claw landed a Rock Tomb there, our Snom was absolutely cooked. But since it didn't, Snom is clear to use one last Struggle Bug, which is just enough to slay the Titan. That was a close call, but our Snom had clutched up to give us our first Titan win. From here, it's only a short walk for us to reach our next destination of Artisan Town, where the second gym leader resides. However, once again, we're interrupted by Nemona. Oh no, it's the ice guy. What are you gonna do? Lower the temperature? Don't underestimate my ice types, Nemona. They are powerful. As long as we don't ever have to fight a fire, rock, steel, or fighting type, then we'll be fine. I should probably start arranging your funeral then. While there are plenty of Ice-type threats looming in our future, thankfully, this next gym fight is not one of them, because Brassius has the misfortune of specializing in grass types, which is actually one of the few types that we have a good matchup against. As a result, this fight against Brassius is very clean, as Glaceon is able to absolutely terrorize Brassius, with icy winds ripping through his team in no time at all. So, our second gym badge was much smoother than the first, and our second Titan fight was also going to be a similar story. This time we're taking on the flying type Bombardier, which is another good matchup for us. This isn't entirely free since Bombardier knows Rock Throw and has some strong stats, but ultimately this is another case of just spamming Icy Wind, which just ends up being enough to clear through both of the Titan's phases, giving us another win on our very first attempt. Gather round, cool guy. I found this old textbook in my mum's lab. I wonder what ancient, sacred wisdom it can share with us. Never mind. It's at this point in the challenge that our team gets a very important upgrade, as it turns out that Snom finally loves me enough, evolving into Frostmoth. Not only does Frostmoth have much better stats than Snom, it also gets access to way more moves, meaning that this little guy had now graduated from being completely useless, giving us a second solid Pokemon. And we are absolutely going to need all the help we can get, because next up is one of the hardest fights of the Pokémon Scarlet early game, Giacomo. As the first team star boss, Giacomo has two dangerous Pokemon, including a Steel-type Pawniard, as well as a Dark-type Starmobile that's packing an enormous HP bar and some powerful stats. Regardless, with my ice-cold, new and improved duo, I felt pretty confident about our chances, so I headed straight for the team starbase and confronted Giacomo, ready to dominate. But that's not what happened. First of all, the lead Pawniard is incredibly dangerous. It's faster than both of my Pokemon, allowing it to hit us with a super effective Metal Claw for big damage. Then, to make matters worse, after I hit it with an Icy Wind, the resulting speed drop causes Pawniard's ability to activate, boosting its attack even more. So, while Glaceon is able to get Pawniard low, we can't finish off the kill before Glaceon is Metal Clawed into its grave. Despite that, thanks to those speed drops, Frostmoth can get the trade, quickly evening things up to a 1v1. However, even though we have the type advantage here, this is still not easy. Super effective Struggle Bugs don't deal anywhere near enough damage, while the Starmobile's Wicked Talks hit our frail bug hard. As a result, we're quickly overwhelmed and outpaced as Frostmoth ultimately falls to a second Wicked Talk. With that, we had been handed our second loss of the run, but our first loss since obtaining Glaceon. I then went on to try this fight 2 more times, but the result was always the exact same. Our Frostmoth just couldn't find a way to overcome the Starmobile in a 1v1. Quickly, we racked up 2 more losses, and our momentum in this challenge had been completely crushed. Our ice types were already starting to struggle in the heat, as our opponents were definitely starting to get tougher. Clearly, our team needed a power boost. And while ice types are hard to come by in the early game, thankfully, we now have access to find one more. See, after beating the last Titan, we unlocked the ability to swim on the back of Koraidon, and this is the key to finding our next ice type. Because by swimming out into the ocean, eventually we can find ourselves our next encounter, Shelder. After quickly catching the floating clam, I decided to name it Slurpee, since that giant tongue is built for slurping. Just like Eevee, Shelder needs a stone before it can evolve into an ice type. However, unlike Eevee, the water stone is much easier to find, since there's one right behind the Cascarafa gym. So with that, our Shelder quickly evolves into Cloyster, who now has the added ice type. Not only is Cloyster one of the OG ice types, it's also a physically defensive tank. And since it's a stone evolution, Cloyster comes pre-packed with a bunch of powerful moves right away. So this gives our team an enormous power boost, and our freshly frozen ice-type trio was ready for revenge. Once again, we stepped forward to take on Giacomo, but this time, things would be very different. Although the fight still starts out the same, with Glaceon falling to Pawniard before Frostmoth quickly gets the trade. And once again, our Frostmoth just can't outpace the Starmobile, getting it low by the time our bug falls. However, this time, we have extra reinforcements. With Cloyster in the back, it only takes one more Razor Shell for us to finish off the Starmobile, claiming the win, as well as our first Team Star scalp. In the end, that ended up being very comfortable once we had Cloyster on the team. However, this point marks the beginning of one of the most treacherous sections of this entire challenge, because we don't get any more Pokemon until after the 4th gym. Before that, we have to take on some of the Ice type's worst matchups, including Fire, Steel, and Water. So, while our team had gotten much stronger, I was terrified about what was to come. And before we even get to those fights, first we have to head to Levincia, where even more difficult fights are waiting. Oh god, not the Ice guy again. I'm not the Ice guy, Nemona. I'm the cool guy, because I'm so cool and popular. Oh please, your Pokemon melt if they're left in the sun. There's nothing cool about them. Oh yeah? How about we settle this in a battle then? Fine, I've got my Rock type, Fighting type, and Fire type ready. Wait, what? We're then forced into a battle with Nemona. Her team actually has some insane type coverage to counter Ice types, but for now at least, her Pokemon are mostly unevolved, meaning that Glaceon can quickly rip through her lead Rockruff, as well as the Pawmi that comes in after that. However, then Nemona follows up with her ace, Crocalor, an evolved Fire type that then gets even stronger after it terastallizes. As proof of how dangerous this guy is, Crocalor then proceeds to melt through Glaceon, and our Ice Bug Frostmoth is incinerated into its grave instantly. Thankfully, Cloyster is able to stop the reverse sweep, as 2 Razor Shells are enough to finish the fight. So, Nemona had been shown not to underestimate our Ice types. Although, once Nemona's Pokemon evolve, her team is going to be an absolute menace for us to deal with. Before we get to the fights that really scare me, first, we have to make it through the 3rd gym leader, Iono. This fight is usually one of the hardest in Pokemon Scarlet, as Iono has some powerful evolved electric types, including a Miss Magius with literally no weaknesses. However, for our team, this fight actually isn't too bad. Iono's Watch Roll is not long for this world, as the bird instantly gets rocked by an icy wind, evening the fight back up to a 3-on-3. Glaceon then continues doing the absolute most, as icy winds, followed by a Swift, are all we need to outpace the chunky Belly Bolt. After Glaceon lands a quick priority Ice Shard onto Luxio, Iono picks up the trade, once again evening the fight at a 2-on-2. But from here, our Ice types are just too powerful, as Icicle Spears from Cloyster quickly crush Luxio. After that, Cloyster and Frostmoth both team up, gradually chipping away at Iono's ace, who ultimately falls to a second Aurora Beam from Frostmoth. With that, Iono had been taken down, and we'd earned a pretty comprehensive 3rd badge on our first attempt. However, it's these next fights on the horizon that truly have me worried, as our trio of Ice types will have to somehow make it through 3 of our worst matchups back to back. And the first of these fights is against Ice's natural enemy, Fire. Fire and Ice is one of the most lopsided matchups of all time. Ice types generally just get melted down into a puddle the moment they come within 5 feet of a Fire type. And in the case of this fight against Mela, her threat level is off the charts, because not only does she have a deadly Fire type Starmobile, but her Torkoal also sets up the sun, making her fire moves even more threatening than they already are. As a result, this fight is incredibly horrifying. Somehow, we'd need to find a way to overcome this blazing inferno. Despite the odds being stacked up against us here, I still wanted to try and take on Mela with our team as it is. So, we stepped up to take on the Fire-type Team Star Boss, and this went about as well as you'd expect. We were absolutely, undeniably crushed here. So much so that I couldn't even make it past Mela's lead Torkoal. Under the harsh sunlight, Torkoal almost takes out Glaceon in a single shot with Flame Wheel. Soon after, Glaceon goes down, and our Frostmoth, with its 4 times weakness to fire, obviously stands no chance here, and it too is burnt to a crisp by Flame Wheel. This leaves us with only Cloyster, who is our strongest option here thanks to its water typing. However, even that isn't enough to save us, as a few clear smogs from Torkoal are all it takes to crush our clam. With that, we had suffered a decisive, brutal loss, and the pain wouldn't stop there either, as I would then go on to try this fight 5 more times, with each attempt ending up the exact same. Our team scorched and melted down into an unrecognizable puddle. Our losses continued piling up, and ultimately, I knew that this fight was just completely hopeless with our team as it currently is. We were getting utterly annihilated, and it became clear that we would need to get a lot stronger if we wanted any hope of overcoming this demon. So I set out to try and toughen up our team. And thankfully, we do at least have some options here. For example, Glaceon is able to learn Rain Dance, as well as a solid water-type move in Water Pulse. With Frostmoth, its 4 times weakness to fire means it's mostly useless against Mela. However, we can teach it the move Light Screen to at least help support the rest of the team. Finally, as our only water type here, Cloyster's job is to deal big damage with Hydro Pump, which will be boosted even more thanks to its newly held Mystic Water. With these upgrades, now we had a much better plan for taking on Mela. As our team of ice types were now much more qualified to be firefighters, we quickly stormed back towards the second team starbase before stepping up to take on Mela, ready to earn our revenge. This time, I lead with Frostmoth, whose only real job here is to set up Light Screen before being incinerated in a single shot at the hands of Torkoal. However, after that, now we can bring in Glaceon, and this is where we start to take over. Our first priority is using Rain Dance, massively reducing the power of fire moves, while also boosting up our water moves. We're then free to start firing off water pulses with Glaceon, and 2 of these are enough to take down Mela's Torkoal. This attempt has already gone far better than any of the previous ones. However, Mela's Starmobile that follows is much more threatening. It starts with a blazing torque that immediately brings Glaceon to the brink of death. But Glaceon surviving here is crucial, as this allows us to use Charm, harshly lowering Mela's attack. And after using Overheat on the next turn, the Starmobile also suffers a nerf to its special attack too. So, the combination of lowered stats, light screen, and the rainy weather all makes this giant car far less threatening. While Glaceon does fall soon after, from here, Cloyster is perfectly equipped to finish things off, as a boosted Hydro Pump instantly brings the Starmobile down into the red. And after Cloyster comfortably survives another attack on the following turn, one last barrage of Icicle Spears are all we need to finish the fight. With that, Mela had finally been defeated, and our ice types had overcome one of their biggest weaknesses in the entire game. Although, while I am definitely glad to have Mela's fire types behind us, now we have to deal with another threat, as next up, we have to take on another one of our weaknesses, Orthworm, the Steel-type Titan. However, this Orthworm has one big exploitable weakness. Not only is this metallic worm very goofy, but it also only knows physical attacks. And this gives us the perfect opportunity to unleash one of our most broken combinations involving Cloyster. See, Cloyster has an impressive physical defense stat to begin with. On top of that, by giving Cloyster these 3 moves, as well as any attacking move, plus a held leftovers, our clan can turn into an absolute behemoth. And the power of this combination was about to be on full display as we approached our next Titan battle against Orthworm. The plan here is pretty straightforward. First, we use Iron Defense to maximize our physical bulk. This, combined with our leftovers recovery, means that this worm can barely lay a scratch on our clan. As a result, now we're free to use one of the best setup moves in the game, Shell Smash. At the cost of lowering both our defenses, Shell Smash gives us a sharp boost in our speed, attack, and special attack. Our special defense is basically non-existent now, but since Orthworm only has physical attacks, this doesn't really matter. As a result, our Cloyster can quickly boost its stats to utterly absurd levels, turning our clan into a Super Saiyan level threat. From here, it only takes a single Hydro Pump to blast Orthworm into its grave, ending the first phase in dominant fashion. The second phase is also just as smooth, leading us to a very quick win over the third Titan boss. That was a very satisfying win, especially since Steel is meant to be one of the hardest matchups for our ice types. Although, there are some much more dangerous Steel types waiting for us in the future. For now though, with Orthworm behind us, once again, we're left to deal with Arven. Cool guy, I'm all out of ideas for how to heal Mabastiff. Nothing seems to be working. If you like, I could freeze Mabastiff inside a block of ice, and how would that heal him? Oh, it definitely won't heal him, but it will help you to keep his meat fresh for when you decide to eat him. Or I guess we could just eat him now? Get away from me and my dog! Putting Arven and his stubbornness aside, now we've reached a critical point of this challenge. Up to now, we've only had a very small selection of ice types to choose from. However, if we can make it past the next gym leader, Kofu, we'll start to get access to a lot more ice types, which should give us a significant power boost. In that sense, Kofu is basically the gatekeeper of our ice type upgrades. But beating him is not straightforward. With 3 evolved water types on his team, Kofu's Pokemon are strong, and they resist all of our ice-type attacks. The ice-type move Freeze Dry would make this fight very straightforward since it's super effective against water types, but Glaceon can't learn it until level 40, so that's locked behind the current level cap. Regardless, water types are basically just melted ice types, so I felt confident in our ice-cold trio and prepared to face up against Kofu and his water types. The battle begins, but things do not go as well as I hoped, because I was expecting that our bug-type Frostmoth could easily handle the psychic-type Veluza, but that's not what happened here, because Veluza knows the move Pluck, which is super effective and hits us for solid damage. Our Struggle Bug hits back even harder, but it's not enough to one-shot, and unfortunately, this battle has a permanent Sandstorm, the damage from which just puts Frostmoth below half health. And this means that on the next turn, our Frostmoth just can't survive another Pluck, meaning that we suffer the first KO. To follow this up, I send in Glaceon and try to override the weather with Snow, but this just fails completely for some unknown reason. This all means that Veluza is able to hit Glaceon with 2 attacks by the time we finally fry that fish with Trailblaze. Although, now we're significantly behind in this fight, as Kofu's Wug Trio hits the field next, and we're only able to hit it with 1 Trailblaze before Glaceon is also sent to its grave. All of a sudden, once again, we were down to only our Cloyster. So, our only choice is to once again rely on our broken strategy. Kofu's Wug Trio knows Water Pulse, which doesn't do a lot of damage, but I can't afford to use Shell Smash since the lowered special defense would be deadly here. So instead, I just have Cloyster focus on boosting up with Iron Defense. Combining this with Protect and our leftovers means that we can use the sandy weather to our advantage. As Wug Trio is gradually worn down by the Sandstorm, Cloyster is able to max out its defense while still being at half health by the time Wug Trio goes down. This leaves us in a 1v1 as Kofu sends in his own ice type, Crabominable. Although, Kofu is clearly smarter than me, as he immediately gets rid of his awful ice type, terastallizing into a water type. Unlike Wug Trio though, this Crabominable only has physical attacks, giving our buffed up Cloyster a much better matchup here. We don't have a lot of health to work with, but I still opt to use Shell Smash once, just to give us the boost in attack power, after which we hit Crabominable with Icicle Spear. Even though it's not very effective, Cloyster's skill link ability guarantees that it'll hit all 5 times. Thankfully, with our rock hard defense, Cloyster can comfortably tank Crabominable's rock smashes. And from here, with one final onslaught of Icicle Spears, Cloyster is just able to hang on long enough to pick up its second KO, securing a 2v1 clutch, as well as our victory over Kofu. With that, Cool Guy had earned badge number 4, and with Kofu taken down, our new level cap finally opens us up to obtaining some extra reinforcements. So far in this challenge, we've had to scratch and claw our way through some incredibly tough matchups. But now, the tide is about to massively turn in our favor as we can finally start to unleash the power of the Ice type. The floodgates now well and truly open, as we can now catch a bunch of new Pokemon. First of which on the list is Sotottle, a landlocked whale with legs, and our first new ice type introduced in Generation 9. After quickly catching Snowmobile the Sotottle, it doesn't take long for us to hunt down our next catch, Sneasel. Despite being very frail, Sneasel is fast and hits hard, making it a big addition to the roster. Following that, we're still able to catch 4 more Pokemon in quick succession, including Snorunt, who I decided to name Snow Globe, a Cubchoo named Polar Express, as well as a Crabrawler, who I finally remembered exists and was able to backtrack to Levincia to catch one. Our final encounter for now is a bit of a unique one, because it's near Porto Marinada that we're able to find ourselves Rotom. Obviously, this guy's not an ice type yet. However, now that we've beaten Kofu, we now have access to the special auctions in Porto Marinada, and it's here that we can bid on a Rotom catalog. And after paying a ridiculous $5,000 for a catalog, we can use it to transform our new Rotom into a fridge, which now gives it a very cool electric ice typing, giving us some much needed extra type coverage. With that, we had now caught a bunch of extra Pokemon, but things were about to get even better. because we can evolve a lot of these guys right away. For example, with a Dawnstone, our Snow immediately evolves into the icy ghost, Frostlass. On top of that, with 2 Ice Stones, we can obtain a Crabominable of our own, as well as a tanky Titan. And finally, after purchasing a Razor Claw, once the sun goes down, Sneasel evolves too into the deadly Weavile. Like I said, beating Kofu was going to give us a massive power boost, and these new ice types are exactly that. Up to this point of the challenge, our progress through Pokémon Scarlet has been slow and difficult, but thanks to this new wave of ice-type reinforcements, thankfully, our next few fights become much more straightforward. Against the third team star boss, Ortega and his poison types don't give us too much trouble, as we're able to clear him on the first try, largely thanks to our new Rotom firing off blizzards against the Starmobile, as well as Titan, who finishes the fight with one last avalanche. The next gym leader is also a similar story. With Crabominable and Frostlass on our roster, we have some really strong counters to Larry's normal types. Also, I have to point out the fact that Crabominable's arms are so big that it completely blocks the opponent's Pokemon from being on screen. Regardless, this fight against Larry is stress-free, as Crabominable and Frostlass tear through the first 2 Pokemon, and after a quick assist from Cloyster, the Ace Staraptor is taken down, yielding us a comfortable 5th badge. So, with our new upgrades, our ice types had picked up some huge momentum, and I was starting to think that this challenge would be easy from here. But then I was reminded about the realities of the ice type, because it's at this point that Nemona returns. I can't believe you're still alive. I thought you and your pathetic ice types would be embarrassed and hiding in someone's freezer by now. Ha! Don't underestimate the cool guy, Nemona. My upgraded ice types and I can take on any fiery opponent. Nothing can stop us now. Oh really? We'll see about that. We're forced into a battle against Nemona, but her team is way stronger than last time, now boasting a Lycanroc, Pormo, and Skeledirge, 3 strong Pokemon that massively counter the ice type. At first, this fight looks to be going well, as Crabominable has a really solid matchup against Nemona's Lycanroc, who falls to a critical hit Brick Break. Gumi and Pormo are both then handled very quickly, and we had gained a massive lead, putting us in a 3v1. However, that one is Skeledirge, a deadly fire type that has insane sweeping potential, thanks to its Fire Terror, as well as the move Torch Song, which also gives it a special attack boost. As a result, Crabominable is immediately burnt to a crisp. After that, Frostlass is only able to land pretty pathetic damage before it too is annihilated by Skeledirge. At this point, with Nemona's +2 special attack, our Cloyster stands no chance, as our Clam is quickly crushed. With that, we had been handed yet another loss, as our whole team had been swept into the dirt. I knew it. Ice types are lame and pathetic. You're not cool at all. That's not true. My ice types are cool. They're just taking a well-deserved rest right now. They're fine. Probably. Clearly, our new team upgrades aren't enough, as Nemona has one of the most stacked ice-crushing teams in the entire game. We'll have to try and find some way of dealing with Nemona, but for now, our challenge continues on, and thankfully, our momentum does pick up once again. The 4th Titan, Great Tusk, is next, and its secondary fighting type does make it a little threatening. However, it also makes this a good matchup for Frostlass, who completely ignores fighting type moves thanks to its ghost typing. As a result, Frostlass can almost take out the first phase of this Titan fight single-handedly, and the second phase is equally as smooth, with Frostlass decimating the Titan thanks to its Frost Breath. That's another comfortable Titan win, although now we're once again left to deal with Arven. Alright Arven, I know you didn't like my last idea. We won't be eating Mabistiff. This time, I have a new idea. Fine. What is it, cool guy? I'll make you a new Mabistiff, entirely out of ice. This one will live forever, as long as you don't ever take it out of the freezer. Gross! I don't want a lame ice-type dog. Leave me alone! Arven continues to be stubborn, but we'll deal with him later. For now, our next opponent is the 6th gym leader, Rhyme. Normally, this is a pretty hard fight, since it's a double battle against some deadly ghost types. However, this time, it's actually pretty simple, because the town of Montenevera has permanent snowy weather. Snow is a new weather type in Generation 9, replacing hail from previous games. And instead of doing chip damage, snow weather gives a 50% defense buff to all ice types. Obviously, this gives us a massive advantage in the fight against Rhyme. On top of that, we can make our Pokemon even tankier by having Frostmoth use its new move, Aurora Veil. This move is like Light Screen and Reflect combined, but it only works in snowy weather. Basically, this makes our entire team incredibly tanky, clearing us to just fire off fully accurate blizzards that hit both of Rhyme's Pokemon. Ultimately, this combination is just so busted for a double battle. We tank Rhyme's attacks like they're nothing. She's not even able to pick up a single KO, as our Frostmoth and Floating Fridge just run wild, freezing Rhyme's entire team into their graves. So, with 6 badges obtained, our team had clearly gotten pretty strong. The Ice type definitely isn't as pathetic as its reputation suggests. However, there is one trainer that we have been destroyed by. Nemona utterly decimated us the last time we fought. Her team is still going to get stronger, which does not bode well for our Ice types. But I was determined to not be slaughtered by Nemona again. So, before moving forward, I made sure to catch every remaining Ice type in the game, starting with Snova. This guy is so important for our team since its ability automatically sets up the snow, making it an obvious addition to our team, who I name Obama Snow, the president of all ice types. After that, our next encounter is also nearby, Avalugg. This thing is basically just a large block of ice with legs. It's also got a massive defense stat, so after I eventually caught it, I named our new Avalugg Titanic. Our next 2 Pokemon are also pretty easy to find. First, we have Delibird. Unlike its robotic descendant, Delibird is basically ice-type trash. That doesn't stop me from catching Delibird and naming it Vanilla Ice, but I honestly don't think there's much it can really offer us. Our catching spree then continues, as I'm also able to find Cryogonal, our new special little snowflake. That all leaves us only one more valid ice-type for us to catch in Pokémon Scarlet. Although, this one is by far the rarest, so it did take a while to find. But eventually, we're able to track down our final encounter, Frigibax. This is one of my favorite new Pokemon in Generation 9. Not only does Frigibax have a dragon ice typing, which is really cool, but it's also a new pseudo-legendary. He might just be a little guy with a big nose at the moment, but eventually it'll become a powerhouse. With those new catches, our team was once again on the rise. And while leveling up our Pokemon, we're also able to get some extra evolutions, with Beartic, Abomasnow, and Arctibax helping to round out our roster. With all of these extra Pokemon, we've pretty much gotten every possible ice type in the game. So now it was time for us to continue the challenge. Although our team was now at maximum power, and while there are some utterly horrifying fights coming up on the horizon, the next few battles honestly don't pose too much of a threat to our ice types. The first of these takes place in Alphanada, where we have to take on the penultimate gym leader, Tulip. Generally, this is one of the easier fights of the game, and Cloyster helps demonstrate exactly why. Because after only a single Shell Smash, Cloyster goes wild, ripping through Tulip's entire roster of Psychic types with a barrage of Icicle Spears. So that gym badge was an express delivery. Although the next one is a little more interesting, because this time we have to take on Grusha, the final gym leader, who also shares the misfortune of being an Ice-type specialist, meaning that this would be an ice-on-ice showdown to determine who truly is the coolest trainer in the region. In reality though, Grusha's team is not built to deal with ice types, while our roster has a lot more options. For example, our new Cryogonal knows the move Ancient Power, which hits Grusha's Frostmoth for big quad-effective damage. Grusha and I then begin trading ice types back and forth as Beartic finishes Cryogonal before Weavile gets the revenge KO with Metal Claw. Ultimately, our giant tanky behemoth behemoth of an Avalugg can body slam its way through Titan, as well as Grush's Ace Altaria, to give us a pretty comfortable win in the end. Now, with all 8 badges secured, it felt like our momentum was once again running at an all-time high, and while the good times were coming to an end, our dominance would at least continue for the next 2 boss fights, because the final Titan, Dondozo, is incredibly weak to freeze dry. This makes the Titan fight completely free, as Glaceon basically locks this whale inside a giant block of ice. After that was quickly dealt with, we're then clear to head on over to the penultimate team starbase. Ortega specializes in fairy types, and he's got some pretty powerful Pokemon, but compared to some of our previous matchups, fairies aren't too bad for us to deal with. As a result, this ends up being another fight that our Gen 1 GOAT, Cloyster, takes care of, with boosted ice beams packing up Ortega in a very simple sweep. With another comfortable win under our belt, our ice types were dominating. With the exception of Nemona, we hadn't really struggled since beating Kofu and catching all of the available ice types. Obviously, the ice type isn't as pathetic as I thought, and like me, you might be starting to wonder, is there anyone left in this game who can stand up to our ice types? Well, it turns out there is, because our next opponent was going to be our hardest fight of the entire challenge so far, Eri. Boasting a team of 5 insanely powerful fighting types, Eri is one of the hardest fights in the entire game. However, the fact that she specializes in fighting Pokemon makes this battle a nightmare for our ice types. Almost all of our Pokemon are weak to fighting. On top of that, we don't have any decent, obvious ways to counter fighting types. Frostlass's ghost typing is obviously helpful, but it's nowhere near enough to solo this fight. And while Delibird might be a part flying type, you also have to account for the fact that it's Delibird, and Deli Trash is not very reliable. I knew that this fight was going to be insanely tough. Regardless, our ice types had been holding their own in this challenge. So, despite my fears, I assembled my strongest team of 6 before raiding the team starbase and marching right up towards Eri for a fight. And really, how bad could this fight actually be? Turns out, really, really bad. Eri's team is just such a hard counter to our ice types. With devastating moves like Close Combat and Aura Sphere, Eri's raw damage output against our team is insane. This is made even worse by the fact that she also has moves like Rock Tomb, Fire Punch, and Spin Out, just to give her even more coverage against our team. As a result, on my first attempt, I was barely able to make it past 3 of Eri's Pokemon before our team was completely crushed. Thanks to that brutal beatdown, our momentum had come to a screeching halt, as we had suffered our first loss since Nemona, and it wasn't really close either, although things were about to get even worse, because on my next attempt, I tried using our strongest strategy with Cloyster and Shell Smash. However, even that isn't enough. Eri's Toxicroak just does so much damage with Brick Break that we're only able to set up 1 Shell Smash, and this is nowhere near enough, as Cloyster can't one-shot Toxicroak, who then proceeds to slam out Clam into its grave. My next best plan was to try using Aurora Veil under Snow, just hoping that the added defenses would allow us to outpace Eri's damage. But even this doesn't work. Toxicroak just uses Brick Break, which shatters Aurora Veil instantly, sending us back to square one. We were getting absolutely trashed, and I was starting to get desperate, so much so that I even tried using Delibird. Yeah, Delibird. Obviously, this little experiment ended up with a very predictable result, and I was now starting to lose hope. In no time at all, we had suffered 5 brutal losses, and I was still nowhere close to beating Eri. Her team was basically just bullying me, and I knew that we had no hope as things currently stand. So, obviously, we needed to change up our approach. First of all, I leveled up all of my Pokemon, which finally allows our Arctobax to evolve into the new Pseudo-Dragon, Baxcalibur. This guy is one of my favorite new Pokemon. It looks awesome, and I'm a fan of big Bax right here. On top of that, I also went hunting for extra TMs, as we needed to come up with a new plan. Now, all of those earlier losses against Eri demonstrated that we just won't be able to beat her in a straight shootout. Her Pokemon are just too too powerful, and this is way too bad of a matchup. So instead, I knew that if we wanted any chance of winning, we would have to get a little creative. And so, with a brand new strategy and a brand new pseudo dragon on our roster, we charged back towards Eri, ready for attempt number 6. This time, my approach is a little different. Our goal here is to first completely neuter Eri's lead Kroger. To do that, I start by leading with a Bomber Snow, who sets up our snowy weather, giving my team a defense boost. After that, I pivot from a Bomber Snow into Frostmoth, and then ultimately into Glaceon. Glaceon is the key here, since our Snowy Fox knows the move Charm, which harshly lowers Toxicroak's attack. And thanks to the defense boost from Snow, combined with our held leftovers, Glaceon is just able to survive long enough to hit Eri with 3 charms, nerfing Toxicroak into the dirt. After that, a quick Will-O-Wisp from Frostlass also cuts Eri's damage even more, meaning that we can now finally start our counterattack. To do that, I send in our newest beast, Baxcalibur, and with Eri's Toxicroak severely nerfed, our Bax is safe to use its new move, Dragon Dance. This boosts up both our attack and speed, and with Eri's Toxicroak now doing pretty pathetic damage, we're clear to keep spamming this over and over. Our dragon was dancing all over the place, hitting one of the all-time great boogies, and before long, Baxcalibur had comfortably hit +6 attack and speed, meaning that now it was time for our revenge. With an onslaught of boosted Dragon Claws, Baxcalibur just tears through Toxicroak, as well as the Persimmon that follows after that. And while Eri's Lucario and Annihilate did decimate us on our previous attempts, this time, Dragon Claws to the jaw are all we need to take them down too. As a result, this all leaves Eri with only her Starmobile. But as deadly as it is, it's no match for our boosted dragon, as Baxcalibur uses Glaive Rush, literally flipping itself upside down and just throwing its whole body at the Starmobile. Thankfully, this is enough to take down the Starmobile in a single shot. With that, we had gotten our revenge over Eri, finally overcoming one of our toughest matchups in the entire game. It took basically every strategy that our team has in its arsenal, but eventually, we had come out with the win. Somehow, a team of Ice types had actually made it to the Pokémon Scarlet endgame. Every fight from this point on is against powerful teams of strong Pokémon. However, while our next few fights aren't easy, they also aren't anywhere near as difficult as Eri. So, we quickly made our way over to the Poké Lighthouse to confront our first victim, Arven. Stop right there, cool guy. Mabistiff and I are going to show you our true power, and in reality, our Cloyster was able to make light work of Arven, clearing us to next head over to deal with Cassiopeia. That's right, all along, Cassiopeia was me, Penny. I will now explain my long-winded plan to... Against Penny, our Weavile is completely free to set up Swords Dances against her lead Umbreon. After that, it's a very brutal beatdown, as Night Slashes and Poison Jabs instantly rip through Penny's entire collection of evolutions, securing us an incredibly dominant win. So, with those fights quickly taken care of, now we can turn our attention towards the Elite Four. Although, for the purposes of this challenge, the Elite Four can basically be separated into 2 groups. First, there's everybody else, and then there's Poppy, the demon child who specializes in steel types, which is one of the ice type's worst possible matchups. Whereas the other 3 Elite Four members are all weak to ice, so I'm not too worried about those. Case in point, the first fight here is against Rika and her ground types. And unfortunately for Rika, she has a crippling weakness to our Cloyster, because after only a single Shell Smash, Cloyster is unleashed and can rip through Rika's entire roster with a barrage of Icicle Spears. So that fight was incredibly straightforward. But then Poppy emerges. Her team is so deadly. Obviously, all of her Pokemon are steel types that resist ice, while also being capable of dishing out big super effective damage. But on top of that, she also has other threats like Copperage's Stealth Rock, which will chip away a quarter of my health anytime an ice type hits the field. And to make this even worse, her ace Tinkaton knows 3 different moves that are super effective against ice types. All in all, Poppy is a demonic opponent for a team of enough ice types to take on. Regardless, we've already had to take on plenty of bad type matchups during this challenge, so I still felt confident and assembled my best roster of 5 before charging forward to take on this horrifying toddler. And unsurprisingly, this fight did not go well. It starts out okay, largely thanks to our fighting Ice Crab, who was able to one-shot the lead Copperaja with a super effective close combat. With this early lead, we're then able to trade effectively, losing only Frostmoth as we gradually take down Corviknight as well as the Bronzong that follows. So we were comfortably in the lead, but then Magnezone hits the field, and this is where things go downhill. Its Flash Cannon hits so hard, brutally crushing our Rotom and our Crabominable, who dies in just a single shot. Abomasnow isn't able to do much as it suffers a similar fate at the hands of Poppy's Magnet. From here, Cloyster just has no way of clutching the 1v2 as our Clam is quickly crushed by Discharge. Despite our strong start, Poppy's Magnezone just swept through our entire team, once again handing us another loss, and once again tossing me and my ice types into the trash. However, the trash is basically the natural habitat of an ice type trainer, so after eventually climbing out of the trash, I put together a new team armed with a new plan before returning to Poppy in search of revenge. Just like last time, the start of this fight is very smooth, with Crabominable picking up the KO onto Copperaja with close combat. This time, against Corviknight, I switch into Rotom straight away before continuously firing off discharges. This allows us to quickly break through Corviknight as well as the Bronzong that comes in after that. So this attempt was going better than the last one, but this is where Magnezone hits the field. It basically soloed my entire team last time, so this time I needed a different approach. After Rotom finally falls, I send in Cloyster and just hope to finish off Magnezone with Hydro Pump. But it isn't enough as our Clam once again goes down to Discharge. However, this is where our new plan comes in, as Frostlass is fast enough to quickly secure the revenge KO with Shadow Ball. As a result, this leaves Poppy down to only her ace, Tinkaton, although it's by far her most deadly weapon, and I absolutely need all 3 of my remaining Pokemon to deal with it. Since Tinkaton is a physical attacker, I've equipped Frostlass with Will-O-Wisp, as the burn will drastically cut Poppy's damage output. Of course, our frail Frostlass can't do much more than that, as it gets instantly wiped out by a Gigaton Hammer. After that, I follow up with Cryogonal with the goal of nerfing Poppy even further. First, with Reflect to give us a generous defense boost. After that, we're also able to hit Tinkaton with Confuse Ray before our Snowflake is also crushed into ice cubes by Gigaton Hammer. This all leaves us with only our Crab. However, thanks to those nerfs, we're comfortably able to survive the incoming Brick Break before one last super effective close combat is all we need to finish off Poppy's ace, giving us our revenge, as well as a massive win over one of our hardest matchups in the game. The demonic child had been left frozen solid, and our team was barely hanging on for dear life. That fight was insanely close. By comparison to that nail-biting win, the rest of the Pokemon League is far less stressful. Our Ice types have an insanely good matchup against the final 2 Elite Four members. This makes it very simple for Cool Guy to freeze his way through the rest of the Elite Four unscathed, clearing us to take on the Paldean champion. I may be the worst champion of all time, but even I think that Ice types are pathetic. Wait, don't you have an Ice type Avalugg? Exactly! Ice types are so bad that even I use them. Despite Geeta actually making a pretty compelling point, out of the remaining fights in the game, this one is the least threatening. Geeta's team doesn't have anything too deadly, making it far more manageable than fights like Poppy or Eri. As a result, this was a pretty straightforward win on the first attempt, meaning that our Ice types had actually gone all the way, becoming Paldean champions. Without a doubt, the Ice type has proven itself as not being trash. Our team had overcome some insanely powerful obstacles, and in doing so, we too had become powerful. However, our hardest battle yet still remains. The penultimate fight of Pokemon Scarlet, Nemona. Her final team is stacked. It looks like it was basically built for the sole purpose of crushing ice types. She's got a rock type, a steel type, a fighting type, and a deadly fire type that completely swept my team the last time we fought. All of her Pokemon are so deadly. However, as an ice type trainer, we've spent most of this challenge being beaten into the dirt over and over again. Despite being decimated by Nemona last time, I was determined to get my revenge. But I wouldn't be satisfied by simply beating Nemona. Instead, I wanted to absolutely crush her. You're still alive, Ice Guy? I thought I melted you back in Medali. It's Cool Guy, and my team are still standing and still cool. You may have literally all of my weaknesses covered, Nemona, but I have a clam. A clam? What's that supposed to do? Wait. Why do I hear boss music? Nemona's team is so powerful, and we can't afford to let her pick up any momentum. So, my plan here is an all-out offense starring our MVP, Cloyster. Nemona leads with a very deadly Lycanroc, but since it's a physical attacker, I'm confident that Cloyster can at least survive one hit. Although, Nemona just decides to set up Stealth Rock, which would be devastating to our ice types if this was going to be a long battle. Cloyster then uses its incredibly busted Shell Smash, sharply increasing our speed and both of our offensive stats. And with these boosts, our Cloyster was about to go on a vengeful tear, because it now outspeeds Nemona's entire team, and a single Hydro Pump is all we need to wipe Lycanroc off the map. Next in is Pawmot, who is probably Nemona's best shot of stopping Cloyster, but it too doesn't get a chance to move, as our deadly Clam also Hydro Pumps it into oblivion too. And from here, things were not going to get easier for Nemona. Despite missing a Hydro Pump onto Orthworm, Cloyster still barely survives the incoming body press. This clears us to continue our onslaught, with Orthworm also falling to Hydro Pump and to Dunsparce following soon after at the hands of an Icicle Spear. Naturally, we make light work of Goodra with a super effective Icicle Spear, meaning that once again, Nemona was down to only her ace, Skeledirge, a dangerous Pokemon who has already reverse swept us once during this challenge. However, Slurpee the Cloyster was not about to let us down, as by thankfully landing one last Hydro Pump, Nemona's ace is blasted into the Shadow Realm. With that, Nemona's final team had been decimated by a single Ice type, embarrassing her in front of everyone, giving us the perfect revenge over our nemesis. With that said, there's still one more fight left in Pokémon Scarlet for us to take on. While Nemona has been our arch rival, the final opponent of Pokémon Scarlet is widely considered to be the hardest fight of the game, Professor Sada. To reach our goal of defeating Pokémon Scarlet, first, we'll have to take down Sada's insanely stacked roster, featuring some of the strongest Pokémon in the entire game. Regardless, our ice types have already had to overcome massive hurdles to make it this far. So, with all the momentum and confidence, I began the long descent down into Area 0 until eventually reaching the pit. And it's here that we're confronted by Sada. This would be the final hurdle for our ice types to prove their strength once and for all. Sada begins the fight by leading with her Slitherwing. So I finally unleash the most deadly ice type of all time, Delibird. Although, this goes about as awfully as you'd expect, because despite Slitherwing being 4 times weak to flying, Delibird's Air Cutter still isn't enough to get the KO, meaning that on the following turn, the Spirit of Christmas is sent to its grave by a Zen Headbutt. It's okay, Delibird, we know you're trash, but we still love you. Despite already being on the back foot, thankfully, Baxcalibur can quickly even the score, as a Glaive Rush finishes off the weakened Slitherwing. As a result though, Sada sends in her Fairy-type Screamtail next, which is a big threat to Baxcalibur. So I have to switch, first bringing in a Bomber Snow to set up the snowy weather. After that, I then switch again into our Ghost-type Frostlass, who completely avoids the incoming Drain Punch. With the snow helping to boost our defense, Frostlass can comfortably tank Screamtail's attacks, with a few Shadow Balls picking up our second KO. Sada then sends in Fluttermane, which is by far her most threatening Pokemon. With Mystical Fire and Power Gem Gem in its moveset, this thing could wreak havoc on our entire team. As evidence of this, a Power Gem completely rocks Frostlass, sending our Ghost to its grave. And while our Abomasnow that follows can land a priority Ice Shard, the damage is pretty pathetic, as it too is melted down into the dirt by a mystical fire. Once again, we were starting to fall behind. At this point, I felt like my best option was to finally unleash our ace, Baxcalibur. Fluttermane does outspeed our dragon, but Baxcalibur is just tanky enough to survive the incoming Power Gem. This gives us the tiny window we need to use Dragon Dance, as Baxcalibur boogies his little heart out once again. With this important boost to our attack and speed, now we're faster than Fluttermane. So, on the next turn, we're able to land a boosted Icicle Crash that finally takes down the deadly Fluttermane. And from here, Baxcalibur was ready to go on a rampage, as a single Icicle Crash is all we need to take down the incoming Sandy Shocks, as well as the Brute Bonnet that follows after that. All of a sudden, the tables are turned, and Sada was left with only her ace, Roaring Moon. In a final face-off between two of the strongest Paldean dragons, thankfully, Baxcalibur moves first, as a super effective Glaive Rush absolutely decimates Roaring Moon in a single shot. With that, Sada's team had been crushed, sending her straight back to the Ice Age. Now, we had completed Pokémon Scarlet using only Ice types. We had absolutely dominated the endgame, showing just how strong the Ice type has truly become. Jump into this video next for more Pokémon content, and let me know in the comments below which Ice type was your MVP and why. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.